Hype train derailments or fraud checks happen extremely often in this sport.
Khamzat Chimaev, are you 100% confident you win that fight?
For sure. I wouldn't ask for it. I wouldn't have said it in an interview if I didn't believe it. He doesn't want that fight, and I'm going to smash him.
Sure, Jan.
But what usually happens is these up-and-coming talents get back on the horse and at least try to right the ship. I might be mixing metaphors there a bit, but the point is the fighters typically move past the loss in some way and accept the humility gut punch when losing hype train status. But the fighters on today's list did no such thing. They immediately retired and in fact, never competed in MMA ever again. So let's take a look. What's up guys, I'm Jason from MMA On Point, and these are 10 fighters who immediately quit in MMA after just one loss. Real quick guys, I do literally mean just a single loss, so as much as I'd like to talk about the downfall of Ronda Rousey or Shane Carwin, they at least did give MMA another shot before hanging the gloves up. Also, this won't be after a long string of losses and a second win down the line or anything. I mean fighters in their prime, at the top of their career, or their notoriety who retired as soon as they lost. Number 10, Minoru Kimura. One of MMA's biggest urban legends was that at a Pride show back in 2005, Charles Felony Bennett, as he's known, got into a fight backstage after he'd already won that night and got choked unconscious by Cristiano Marcelo. Dude woke up and got into a third fight with Wanderlei fucking Silva, who is about 3 weight classes bigger than him, and managed to actually knock Silva out. This was while Wanderlei Silva was the defending Pride light heavyweight champion, who also won his fight that night too, so this whole thing is crazy. So yeah, for years and years, Bennett and Wanderlei would just immediately start getting into it anytime they were in the same room, and it would likely still be the same situation if they saw each other today. And for years, Wanderlei denied this until finally telling a channel, the Flow podcast in Brazil, that yeah, it really did happen.
Nisso, meu professor de jiu-jitsu foi lá e encaixou uma chave ali num triângulo. Aí acordaram o cara, aí eu, muito mitidão, comecei a empurrar o cara pra fora. Falei, sai, 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 sai. E pau! Me deu um soco no queixo. Aí eu tô sentado num banco de frente com o meu professor. Eu falei, Rafael, o que aconteceu? Ele falou, o cara acabou de te nocautear aqui.
You can kind of see why these two don't like each other. So fast forward about 11 years, Pride is long gone, Wanderlei is all but retired, dealing with injuries, and goes to Japan to try and get revenge on Bennett through one of his proteges, Minoru Kimura. He was born in Brazil, but of Japanese descent, and he moved back to Japan as a kid and had become a huge star through K1 and kickboxing more generally as one of the legitimate top pound-for-pound kickboxers in the world at that point. Dude to this day is still competing in top-level K1 tournaments, roid accusations aside. So Rizin, the MMA successor to Pride in Japan, decided to set up the Brazilian protege of Wanderlei's to fight with Charles Bennett, who by 2016 had a record that ripened to a 30-30-2 record, and he was 36. Meanwhile, Kimura was only 23. Guess who was the favorite in this one? So with Wanderlei ringside, this was the perfect opportunity to get back at Bennett for what he did all those years ago. And here's what happened.
I am stoked for this fight. Oh! Overhead right there. In the front of you! That's it! The fight is over! He's going after Wanderlei!
Yeah. Not exactly what anybody would have thought. Bennett had a full-on field day with this one.
Man, the celebration was more work than the fight. Fight 7 seconds. That's the quickest paycheck I've ever made. Wanderlei, for the record, you know what happened in 2005.
Oh my.
That's why you're still salty.
Charles Bennett just grabbed the cameraman and put himself and Wanderlei in the same frame.
And yeah, there's a no-brainer on this one on why Kimura never came back to the sport. He was already a huge kickboxing star, and that was it. His only MMA fight. Number 9, the First Family. There's clearly one family that has stood head and shoulders above all the rest, and that's the one that started it all, the Gracie family. But there are so many family members who have competed that it becomes pretty difficult to track the lineage. There's obviously the big ones, Hoist, Penzo, Hickson, and there are some of the more recent names that you know, like maybe Neiman or Crone Gracie, but perhaps just as famous in his time and extremely hyped for many years as the original bad boy of the family was Ralph Gracie. He also happens to be the man who took in a young BJ Penn as a white belt that famously became the prodigy due to winning the world championships in just 3 years' time.
And
this is where it all started for me. I mean, this is it. This is the mat. This is where it would go down.
So yeah, Ralph Gracie is somewhat a legend in the sport. He actually fought in one of the mega popular in Brazil Desafio events in January of 1992 against Geraldo Silva, almost 2 years before the UFC even came around.
For practitioners of the striking arts, not knowing how to escape from the clinch and what to do once you get to the ground is more than a weakness, it's fatal.
And what made him a standout back in the day was he wasn't your typical submission-only styled Gracie fighter you might associate with the rest of his family, like Royce or even Rickson, as they often just went the strict Gracie Jiu-Jitsu route for a finish. But for Ralph, he had the nickname of the Pitbull, which back then wasn't a super common overused nickname, and he definitely earned it with his much more comparatively brutal style.
No matter of how much Nelson can take, and he's covering up. This should be over soon. How much of this can Nelson take? They've got to stop it, and they do.
No way you'd ever see Royce win a fight like that, right? Dude was just way more intense than pretty much anybody else in the family, including his younger brother Ryan, which is crazy to think. And the dude just kind of had a crazy looking, menacing expression on his face 100% of the time. Anyhow, his first fight in the US, he won the lightweight championship for Battlecade, continued on there for a couple more years, which was all by finish, by the way, before finally going on to Pride after 5 years being absent.
He's the best fighter in the world. No one will fight him. I invite anyone to come up and talk to me about fighting this guy. There it is.
And he can win this whenever
There it
he
is.
wants.
Armbar.
Is there anybody in the world that can stay in the ring with you for over 1 minute?
I don't think so.
No way. Who do you want next?
Roy Jones, if you hear me now.
He had an impressive win despite all the layoffs over Gokhan Jonosuke Mamisha, but the next time we saw him, it was against none other than the Fireball Kid Takanori Gomi. And this was 12 years after his first official MMA fight. Very similar to Ralph Gracie versus Matt Hughes in terms of generations clashing, with new school being vastly superior, and in his case, he got knocked out immediately with knees on the ground.
That looked like it hurt Ralph.
Alf is done. Alf is done.
You might feel bad for the guy, but he's honestly a bit nuts, and memorably attacked Flavio Almeida out of nowhere for opening a gym too close to him, allegedly. Well, not even allegedly. Dude went to prison for 6 months over this.
You sustained some pretty serious injuries too. You had some memory loss. You lost a couple things, right?
It was pretty bad, man. I lost my 2 front teeth.
He's not the only Gracie to have retired after a single loss, though. Ralph Gracie did as well, but he was only 3-1 when doing so, and doesn't have nearly as storied of an MMA career. Same with Royce's son, Conry. Number 8. You might want to hide those.
Take care of you, man.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Yep, David Teymur is to this day almost certainly still known for just this one line. But landmark historical moments aside, Teymur was a super legit prospect at one point in time.
Hey! Nice knee to the body. Holy.
He made it to the final round of Tough and got into the UFC after that. He came out of the gate quick with 2 second-round KOs, and then took fight of the night, being the first man to stop the hype train of Lando Venata. You know, the guy who just came in and nearly stopped a prime Tony Ferguson on less than a week's notice.
It's pretty good. Nice. Pretty good. Yeah.
He also broke the undefeated streak of Drakkar Klose, and then an already 10-year veteran of the UFC in Nick Lentz. This was in June of 2018, and it meant that he had not lost officially as a pro in 5 years. So what happened? Well, he ended up getting matched up with Charles Oliveira for one, and sadly for David, this was part of the championship run that Dubronx went on when he returned to 155, and yeah, David Teymur got wrapped up with an anaconda choke in the second round.
There's that word. He continues to pile onto his record. Charles Dubronx.
And strangely, he never fought again. February of 2019 was David Teymur's last fight. Fun fact, his brother's last fight was in 2019 as well. David on MMA NYTT's channel in a Swedish interview mentioned he had injuries with his neck that have made it difficult for him to train and heal, but he maintains he was still technically on the UFC's roster, and never say never. That seems more and more unlikely with each day passing. Number 7, the blueprint. If Igor Zinoviev, we'll get to him later, was one of the first real Sambo fellow fighters to blaze the trail in MMA alongside Oleg Taktarov, Kareem Barklay was the man once thought to kick the door down in their footsteps, and also happens to be born in Georgia, then later brought up in Dagestan, so he's actually a trailblazer on a few different fronts here. Kareem, as he would go by, first started in MMA in a promotion called IAFC, which was one of the premier promotions in the region back then that also held fights with Igor Zinoviev and had plenty of international talents as well. So Barklay got his taste of international competition with Joe Charles, somebody who had fought at multiple early UFC events by 1997 when these two squared off. And it was just immediately obvious Barklay was the superior ground fighter, not just taking Charles down, but managed to smother the guy so badly that by the end of it, he basically gave up to a forearm choke out of, I don't know, just exhaustion.
This guy is excited about his victory.
Annoyingly though, Barklay's fights are insanely difficult to find, as he's got a whole tournament that he won that I practically lost my mind trying to find without any success. And after that was a really bizarre set of fights with Gilbert Yvel in 1997 and 1998, both extremely controversial. For one, the first fight was in rings before they switched over to full-on MMA rules, and it was just really strange. Barklay could only take him down for a few seconds at a time before they were stood up by the ref, and they actually couldn't punch, despite Gilbert doing it numerous times and of course grabbing the ropes illegally over and over again. Somehow I can't find this anywhere on Barklay or Yvel's record, despite many fights from this period in rings still being on everyone else's records, but these stand-ups from the takedowns were still really strange even for that time period in rings. It is a loss, but again, isn't on his record nor Yvel, so I don't know what to do with this fight. But then there was a second fight with Yvel that was just as crazy in IAFC, where Yvel repeatedly grabbed the cage, eye-gouged him, all sorts of stuff. But the big moment happened at the end when, after a cage grab, Yvel managed to finish Kareem. And then Kareem's coach, another rings guy, Gokhan if you know him, just jumped in there and slapped the ref. So that's at least two ways Yvel won, right? Well, it was revealed a couple moments later how bad the bite marks on Barklay's chest were.
Oh no, those are teeth marks. Oh no.
Well, they're certainly not hickey, so obviously he was bitten by Gilbert Yvel.
And so Barklay actually won this time by DQ, and let's be honest, he probably should have won that first fight with as many fouls were in that one. Either way, by the year 2001, he was officially undefeated in MMA at 8-0 with an 80cc championship to his name that got wild as well. But up next, he was jumping into a gigantic tournament full of future champions and legends, an event called Shidakhan Jitsu Warriors War in Kuwait. It was an 8-man tournament that featured 3 UFC champions including Matt Hughes, Carlos Newton, and Dave Manet, not to mention Jose Landy Johns or Pele at 17-3 at the time. A man who absolutely destroyed the second round of this tournament right after he had a knockout of Matt Hughes. But when Barklay got to Pele, he absolutely went through that guy until Big John McCarthy mercifully stepped in.
That's it, McCarthy's seen enough. Pele, wow.
And so in the final, it ended up being him and the future middleweight champion Dave Manet, where surprisingly Manet took Barkalayev down on several occasions and put the pressure on him immediately. Barkalayev did well in his own moments too, but was clearly spent from the rest of the card, where Manet's heart pulled him ahead. Actually, a lot of people thought Barkalayev won as well. It's just that close of a fight. And with that one loss, that was it for Kareem. It's been a mystery as to why he so suddenly stepped away, and I found a Russian translated interview where he himself said the same. Quote, "I myself can't understand the reason. I came to Moscow, started doing some business, and then gave it all up. I even got married." And he's openly denied that his retirement had anything to do with injuries. He's mentioned pay not being great back then, but also the fact that he was in phenomenal shape and probably would have taken the right fight back then. I guess the big offers just never really came and he was gone. Number 6, a kickboxing legend. Alright, yeah, a ton of you are definitely going to know this one, and for those that don't know, Gokhan Saki is one of the most legendary kickboxers to ever cross over into MMA, and he was coming over at the perfect time with guys like Izzy on the ascent and Pereira soon following. He's a multi-time K1 tournament finalist and winning plenty of Muay Thai tournaments, and even being the first ever Glory Light Heavyweight champion and Glory Tournament champion, and so his story in MMA is unique for a ton of reasons, and part of that is that he's only fought in MMA 3 times. Once way back in 2004 in a fight that I've never been able to find. If anyone out there knows where it is, apparently he got TKO'd there, but it was a bit of a dabble for him really early on. So when he came to the UFC in 2017, it felt like a fresh start, and man, did he immediately get people's attention, taking out Henrique da Silva. I remember people putting together highlight videos of that fight, just talking about how the light heavyweight division wasn't ready and this guy was about to make a huge splash after a UFC debut like that. Well, he just so happened to be booked in his next fight against none other than Khalil Roundtree.
That's one bad motherfucker.
Back then, I don't even think a lot of us knew how dangerous he really was, but it was still 6 years before Khalil got his first title shot, and even a few years before some of his most notable wins. So even with the shared Muay Thai experience, Saki was far more accomplished on that front, but only a minute 36 into the fight, and just as Rogan and Cruz were saying it was a matter of time before Khalil would shoot for a takedown, Saki got completely flatlined. Rogan exclaimed that Khalil had just shocked the world, and just like that, Saki was done. His massive foray into the UFC cut short with only a single loss after UFC 226 in July of 2018. And yeah, the reason he didn't stick around is obvious. He was 34 already, and there was just too much ground to catch up on that didn't really make sense for him to pursue things further. That, and he mentioned his own injuries through training were catching up to him.
Wrestling, jiu-jitsu, my body was just not used to this. At the point, I was scared to go for a wrestling training, that I'm gonna get injured again. So mentally, I was finished.
Number 5, the movie star. When you look into the history of women's MMA, there is a short list of names that come to mind in terms of trailblazing, especially prior to Ronda Rousey. Perhaps Erica Montoya comes to mind, Megumi Fujii, Marlos Kunin, but one star was bigger than all of them, and that's Gina Carano. She came from an athletic family where her father was a former NFL quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys, and actually later on in life served for the Nevada State Athletic Commission, including Mike Tyson's famous hearings after biting a piece of Evander Holyfield's ear off.
I believe Mr. Tyson has met his burden, that he's expressed complete remorsefulness in regards to the Holyfield incident.
So yeah, growing up in the fight capital of the world and seeing giant fights like this happen, you could say she perhaps is one of the most sensible choices for an MMA career, or just fighting in general. But of course, starting in the 2000s was anything but a walk in the park for a female fighter.
The cage is not for women, please. I mean, Gina Carano is a very beautiful girl. I don't know why she wants to mess her face up. Me personally, I do not want any girl to get in the cage and fight. I mean, come on.
Anyhow, her fight still managed to do a ton of the talking as a Muay Thai practitioner, starting off her legit MMA career after a few unregulated fights, but then going pro with 2 straight KOs, including KOing the still then undefeated Rosie Sexton, who was the first ever Cage Warriors Bantamweight champion, with a single punch.
So, big right hand. Beautiful right hand. 4 minutes and 54 seconds of the second round.
And from there, the momentum was extremely fast. She fought in Strikeforce, then literally in the first ever US women's televised fight with Julie Kedzie, and her undefeated streak continued all the way to 7-0, where she was one of the most popular stars literally in the sport, who was for the first time in women's MMA really getting some positive press going.
American Gladiators, movies, you're appearing in video games now. I mean, you're kind of like the face of women's MMA right now. You are blowing up, sister.
Really? Yep, and that's that. It's the first of many, too, so get used to it, sister.
But faithfully, yep, her next fight was with Cyborg. She tried her best, but was just honestly no match and got finished at the end of the very first round.
It was just too much power for Carano. Caught up in the fence, too much power.
And so that was her last fight. And it begs the question, what happened to her? Well, I think the clearest answer was about 1 billion opportunities elsewhere. She never really had given a straight answer as to the direct reason, but instead pretty much says it was down to a lot of things.
After the fight, I was really bummed, and I went to San Diego for a while. And that's where I got the call to do the movie. Then I got that opportunity immediately. And so I'm still holding on to kind of a dream that women will fight in the UFC.
Number 4, the suspect's bodyguard. Okay, this is a crazy one because this story takes a lot of wild turns. If you don't know who this man is, Igor Zinoviev was about as hyped a prospect as you could have gotten in the 1990s. He was one of the true early Sambo representations in the sport who also had high-level judo training and boxing experience too, so he was great on the ground and feet when basically nobody had skills in both. And as a result, he was one of the first MMA fighters to show the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu legend wasn't quite as invincible as people thought it was versus other disciplines. And sure enough, when Igor went to his first tournament in 1995 for Battlecade, he absolutely wrecked Harold German pretty much immediately.
He has a long way to go. It took about 20 seconds. Tap it out. He quit.
Not only that, but it also happened to feature a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu legend, Mario Sperry, in the final, who would go on to beat guys like Igor Vovchanchin and Hiromitsu Kanehara in Pride. And Sperry also just so happened to be a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu champion coming into this. And in their fight, Zinoviev withstood everything Sperry had, and then he landed a soccer kick on the guy to split him wide open and quickly made him tap out. So this made him Battlecade's middleweight champion. And this really all put him on the map, as the UFC wasn't the only show in town getting worldwide talents back in those days. And so then he finished 2 more opponents, including a pre-roid cycle Enson Inoue, before having some draws. In my opinion, he beat John Lober, but the 3rd round was close. Either way, in this era of MMA, scoring criteria not being what it is now, they just kind of called it a draw. But that was John Lober, a man who happened to have the very most recent win over the UFC's middleweight champion Frank Shamrock. And so naturally, the UFC decided to bring in Igor Zinoviev after a quick stop in Pancrase to challenge Frank Shamrock for that title in Shamrock's first defense.
It is going to be a wonderful matchup this evening.
So legitimately hyped beyond belief at this point, with the credentials in MMA now to back it up, we were in for a war. Or so we thought.
Oh my! He's out! He dropped him on his head. He's out cold.
Sadly for Igor, he not only got KO'd by this slam, but it also broke his collarbone and instantly ended his career, literally in his only loss. I would feel bad for the guy, but here's the crazy twist, guys.
He was Jeffrey Epstein's
Igor Zinoviev was Jeffrey Epstein's security guard? No fucking way.
He was Jeffrey Epstein's bodyguard for a ton of years. What the fuck? This one actually might be worth a deep dive of its own, my god. And yeah, there's a lot of shady stuff going on with this one. What the hell? Number 3, the bank heist. All you gotta do is say one name to most people in the MMA community, and the infamy of this man pretty much precedes everything else I'm about to say.
I'm Igor from London, England, from a very judo flat. I know nothing about the guy that I'm fighting, so I just wait and see what happens.
And the UK only had just started to really get its own scene established. Way back in 1999 was Lee Murray making his official MMA debut. And the next year, the dude even flew to Wisconsin, of all places, for a one-night tournament and suffered an early loss to Joe Dirksen. But over the next 4 years, the guy wouldn't lose, and he even took out Jose Landy Johns, or Pele, you know, the guy I mentioned earlier that took out Matt Hughes and Pat Miletich. Well, Lee Murray sparked the guy unconscious, and look at this crowd, guys. Early MMA is just wild. This definitely turned a lot of heads with the UFC, and oh yeah, he supposedly KO'd Tito Ortiz in a street brawl that has pretty much been verified at this point.
One of Tito's good buddies, but Bo, his buddy, real nice guy. I felt horrible for him. We came out of the nightclub in London, and Bo jumped on my back, and he put me in a rear choke, but he wasn't choking me because I'd been hanging out with him all night and joking around and stuff. So one of my fighters, Tony Fricklin, thought that Bo was actually choking me. And the alley blew up into a huge fight. I wasn't hitting anybody, but I watched Tito come running from my left, and he was doing this and ripping his jacket off, his leather coat off. As he was running forward, I looked to my right, and there's Lee Murray backing up, doing the same thing, taking his coat off.
And he turns around and stops and plants his feet. I go to stop, and I slide right into him. He clipped me, dropped me, and I popped right back up. Cops came, broke everybody apart. I was never unconscious at the time. In my whole career, I've never been unconscious, and I never will go unconscious. I think those stories were fabricated a lot to try to build Lee Murray up.
His account is obviously pretty flawed because he got KO'd by Lee Murray. Tito threw a combo at Lee. Lee ducked out of the way of everything, threw a 5-punch combo back at Tito. Every punch landed, very hard punches, and Tito went down, landed on his face unconscious.
All of the stories about Lee knocking out Tito are 100% true. Pat and all the guys were there.
I had seen him when he fought Tito in the street out in front of China White in London.
I know I've heard that story. He dropped him, didn't he? Put Tito a kip.
Yeah.
And it was while Tito was still the UFC champion. So Lee was brought in, and somewhat foreshadowing Bisping about a decade later, he ends up finishing Jorge Rivera. But to add to the mythos, he actually subs the guy transitioning from a triangle to an armbar pretty much immediately.
Well-rounded Lightning Lee Murray shows he's got ground skills. The plan for Lee Murray is he wants to fight a couple times at 185 pounds and then move up to 205 for the grudge match with Tito.
All roads were leading to him fighting Tito in a massive showdown as Tito watched in the front row, but some seams began to show as to who Lee Murray really was and couldn't get his visa approved to fight in the UFC again.
In June 2004, English prosecutors filed attempted felony road rage charges against Murray for nearly beating to death a motorist who sideswiped his car. The indictment led the U.S. State Department to deny Murray a work visa, derailing his dreams of being an MMA star in America.
So he ends up staying in the UK and signed with Cage Rage, and guess who he ends up fighting? This was in 2004 and just a couple years ahead of Anderson's incredible middleweight run. So these two were competing for the Cage Rage title.
Oh, good kick by Silva. He's right. Lee Murray. Both men just trading blows. That's what the crowd like to see.
Lee gave a great accounting for himself, but just wasn't able to beat the future middleweight GOAT. And you'd think with such a promising career that Lee would have plenty of time to rebound at only age 26. But that's when his other life took over.
Forget the great train robbery. Forget the Northern Bank in Belfast. Britain's biggest ever robbery took place in the early hours of this morning in Kent.
Robbers made off with an incredible £53 million.
An armed gang made off with perhaps as much as $90 million. $90 million, all of it in cash.
By the time investigators became convinced that Murray was the mastermind, he had fled here, to Morocco, his father's birthplace.
When did Lee become a Moroccan national?
As soon as he was born. Anybody whose father is Moroccan is Moroccan.
The Moroccan Supreme Court is expected to rule on Murray's extradition later this year, where the maximum sentence could be 10 years.
The biggest mistake that Lee Murray made is that he invoked his Moroccan citizenship.
They came back and said the sentence was wrong. It was too lenient, and we sentenced him to 25 years.
25 years, and there's no early release in Morocco.
Yeah, that dude's career and pretty much anything else he ever wanted to do in life was over in 2006 when he got caught. Number 2, the fall guy. It's actually pretty common that a fighter makes it onto the Ultimate Fighter, it doesn't go their way, but the UFC gives them a shot at the finale to at least make it into the UFC. They lose, and then we never see them in the promotion ever again. But even then, it's rare for them to actually retire immediately.
Hey man, this is a warrior.
Anyhow, there are a few notable exceptions, like Big Baby Marcus Jones, who lost officially on his pro record to Matt Mitrione and disappeared for good after that. Leah Letson was similar, and Juan Espino, who actually won his season. I'd go into more detail there if there wasn't so much here that I wanted to focus on instead. Because the guy who you really got to talk about having just one fight in the UFC, losing it, and never returning to MMA again is without a doubt Strange Brew himself, Jason Thacker. Dana famously has said that the first season of The Ultimate Fighter was about legitimizing the sport.
We get together and we're casting this thing, and all they care about is, personalities.
A guy would come in and tell a great story. I think, he'd be really good as one of the contestants. And Dana would go, no, he's a lousy fighter. He'll never make it.
We got to find guys that can fight first.
Well, that's not exactly true.
At the end of the day, if you got a bunch of guys in your company that can't actually fight, but they got great personalities, you got Keeping Up with the Kardashians.
Chuck Mindell actually recently published a fantastic article on Jason Thacker. Did you feel like he was a sacrificial lamb?
Reality shows, they like to have those contrasting characters. He was a sacrificial lamb.
I just was really like, what's this guy doing here? And all I could think of in my head is like, with Thacker was like, that was the their way of showing how difficult it was. They wanted to show somebody who couldn't hack it.
Jason Thacker was essentially the guy remembered from that first season of Tough for all the wrong reasons. He supposedly had body odor issues, wasn't really conditioned coming in. The guys on the show were actually the ones that nicknamed him Strange Brew. And of course, Chris Lieben pissed on his bed. Not only that, but he in fact was eliminated on the show, not for losing his fight, but for losing a random coach's challenge. This was before they figured out mid-season, hey, maybe it's kind of a dumb idea to have fighters eliminated through random games instead of, fighting. And then of course, he absolutely gets destroyed by Chris Lieben on the finale.
That's it. It's over. Wow. Chris Lieben makes short work of Jason Thacker. That was brutal.
He's a nice kid, but we're here because we're fighters, not because we're nice guys.
And it begs the question, what the hell happened here? Well, before I get into any more of this, I cannot recommend enough that everybody go and read Chuck Mindenhall's amazing 2015 article from MMA Fighting, where he actually caught up with Jason Thacker, and that read is pretty much where all these details come from. It legit might be my favorite article I've ever read about anybody in this sport. So basically, as Thacker tells Mindenhall in this interview, a good friend of his had just died while they were together on a camping trip. So dude was on all sorts of antidepressants with severe insomnia, and he grew up extremely poor. So hearing about the casting of the show, and even though he'd never actually fought in MMA before, he saw these casting calls for The Ultimate Fighter as potential light out of his situation. So he decided to send in a tape of him literally training in his old dilapidated barn. Sent in some of his very real Muay Thai fights that he tried to pawn off as MMA fights, and the producers of the show basically gave him a call almost exclusively because of how eccentric and reality TV ready he was, not because of any of his skills. Even then, he was still a last minute choice, as the show's producers only gave him a call the night before after somebody else failed the drug test necessary to get on the show. So Thacker dove on it with no notice. No medication, which set him on withdrawals throughout the taping of the show. Didn't even have time to pack properly. So they gave him a bunch of, quote, raggy clothes, as he put it in the interview. And he literally admitted to them that he had no actual MMA experience. The 4-1 record that he sent to them, well, yeah, those were just Muay Thai fights. And they didn't care. He was going to make for good TV, so of course, his bed gets pissed on, and he gets eliminated off the show in the second episode. And yeah, he goes on to fight in the finale against Lieben, like I mentioned earlier, and literally, that's the only MMA fight on his record ever. So, what exactly happened here? Well, it turns out a lot. By 2015, when this interview happened, this is what he looked like. And the guy had pretty much been through hell. As the lone contestant on the show from Canada, apparently a bunch of guys in the area from other gyms and just general drunk dudes took umbrage with how he represented the country. So in one story that he tells, somebody literally took a metal pipe to his face, chipped his tooth, broke his nose, and he had to have that tooth removed as it got infected. And dude basically just got jumped multiple times as he was a loner. The guy wasn't coming from some MMA gym, he was by himself when all this went down. And by 2015, he was taking care of his ill family members full time as they needed round-the-clock care. But they were too poor to actually afford professional help, with Canadian healthcare covering most of the cost, but not all of it. That meant he literally had to wake up in the middle of the night to make sure his family was taking their proper medication on schedule. Essentially hospice care for multiple family members, as well as cooking, cleaning, and everything else that needed to be done for both of his parents and his brother. Jason Thacker had been through hell over the years. By 2015, he had no phone, no car, no girlfriends, or any friends for that matter, as he was seen as an embarrassment who turned to drinking to cope. And by this point, he had gotten clean, but he was still poor. And by this point, he pretty much saw The Ultimate Fighter is the worst thing that had ever happened to him. And so why didn't Jason Thacker ever fight again? Use some of that fame to good effect and maybe redeem his name in the process? Well, the UFC held him under contract for an entire year, where he couldn't compete anywhere else. He was given $1,500 when they finally released him. That was supposed to be for compensation. And after that, the only fights that were being offered his way were against MMA Gym's Golden Boy boys, usually a few weight classes up, and nobody in the area really wanted to train him either. So that one fight is all he ever had before or since. By the way, this article goes into so much more detail than what I've touched on. I can't recommend it enough. I'll link it below for you all to check it out. But the good thing about this article is it finally brought Thacker some good fortune. A reader by the name of Aidan O'Connor actually started a GoFundMe for Jason and raised $13,000 in just a few days for the guy. The GoFundMe is actually still up to this day, believe it or not. Shout out to Aidan, Mendenhall, and of course Jason Thacker himself. My faith in humanity was restored just a little bit here. And real quick before number one, I do want to give some other mentions here. Like I said in the beginning, to qualify for this list, it really does need to be somebody with their very last loss on their record. And it's also got to be from a top promotion from that time period and when the guys are at or near their prime. And that includes guys like Ryan Hall or Gregor Gillespie, who did have devastating losses, but both managed to come back and actually get a win before closing the books on their career so far. Then there are guys like Sean Gannon, who didn't have very long careers by the time they lost and were just on short streaks outside of the top promotions anyway. Then there are those who maybe weren't as notorious. Brianna Fortino was an Invicta champion and lost in just her second UFC fight before retiring. Ted Williams was an old school vet who didn't lose a single fight, but he only fought for about a year and a half and was actually more well known for his own promotion with Gladiator Challenge. Or how about Jake Ellenberger's brother, Joe Ellenberger, losing to Barbarina? He was only on a 3-fight win streak, though, and barely made it through his lone UFC win. Claude Patrick, though, was the hardest one to eliminate from this list, as he hadn't lost in 9 years and had 3 wins in the UFC already, and merely lost a split decision to Brian Ebersol before hanging up the gloves in 2011. Again, he just wasn't as notorious as a lot of these other guys, but apparently he had some injuries and did try to get booked again when he was feeling better, but it just never happened. And number one, the Vale Tudo legend. If you've never watched the Rickson Gracie documentary Choke, I don't think I could possibly recommend it enough. It featured the ever-elusive Rickson Gracie, the unanimous best of the family according to the family members themselves that we never really got to see fight in the States. And this was Japan's answer to those original UFC tournaments. They had seen what Royce had done with the UFC and wanted to show off their own Japanese talents. But what always stood out to me more than watching this was the tale of Yuki Nakai, as he ended up being heavily featured inside the film. And when he entered into the Vale Tudo Japan 1995 tournament, he was already a Shudo champion for about a year and a half, more than a mere prospect, but a legitimate top-level athlete in his prime. And at 24 years old, at 5'6", he was far outweighed by his opponent, Gerard Gordeau, at 6'5". But what commenced instead of a fun David versus Goliath type attraction was a brutal showcase in rule breaking that has rarely been surpassed, if ever. Gordeau, instead of respecting the rules or his inherent height and weight advantage, decided to go after Yuki's eyes illegally and blatantly for nearly the entirety of the fight. The refs clearly had no real idea of how to handle what was going on, and sadly, this resulted in Yuki being permanently blinded in that right eye. Incredibly though, Nakai managed to not only persevere but actually tap Gordeau after 4 rounds with a heel hook. In the next round, he actually took out another towering foe in the 6'1" Craig Pittman.
Armlock! He's tapping! Pittman submits from an armlock! The winner is Yuki Nakai!
Yuki was just incredible on this night, but that's when he met the inevitable Rickson Gracie in the final and would succumb to a rear naked choke. And you guessed it, the reason his whole career ended up abruptly after this one loss was in fact due to that permanent and intentional rule-breaking, eye-blinding injury from Gerard Gordeau. So how does the man who did this reflect on it? Here's what he told the MMA History podcast in 2023.
He took his eye out. He also gave interviews afterward with no regret in regards to it.
Yes. I don't care.
What a piece of shit, man. But to put the focus back on Yuki, he hid this injury from the press for years because he didn't believe that that was what MMA was about and did not want to put a stain on it in the media. Yuki Nakai is a bona fide legend and deserves a movie of his own. Anyhow, that's it for me, guys. Hope y'all at least learned something there. I know it ended up being a bit depressing, but there's some crazy good stories that just need to be told in MMA, and I'm really happy I got a chance to share those with you. A big shout out to Max Randall for helping me with this. He did a fantastic job on a lot of these entries and massively helped me out. Thanks so much to you, Max. With that being said, guys, have a great day, and I'll see ya on the next video. Peace.